Thursday, October 30th, market analysis, Stan Ehrlich. You know, I start out with the indexes, go to futures and some stocks lately. Well, we're on our way down, in my opinion. Yesterday was the nail in the coffin because of the bearish engulfings that we had. And I said so at the time. Now, today we've got lower closes and very unusual. I don't remember the last time. Maybe I've seen this once or twice before in a couple of decades or more. We have two bearish engulfing ER signals back to back. Today's high is just a squeak, a few ticks higher than yesterday's high, therefore killing the signal yesterday, but reinstating it pretty quickly by dropping into lows lower than yesterday's lows. Still overbought, brand new signal, no change of opinion, and the first gap, the highest gap, about half of it's closed. We dropped off and didn't quite do the job completely. I'm still expecting 68.40 and a half, but that's not the story. I'm still thinking at a very bare minimum, and this looks to be way too small an amount, 68.15. But there's another layer of support and resistance that looks like it's more profound, and I've got to say, it kind of starts at 65.78. That I think is my much more likely downside expectation. So the 5-minute chart, MES, starting to break down, new lows, new low closes for 1, 2, 3 days or so, closing about half of the gap. We have no significant reversals on the SPY, only because yesterday managed to squeak out a slightly higher close at 1 o'clock California time, the traditional closing time. It did have a higher high, lower low. It is overbought. And if it would have just stayed a little bit lower than the previous day's close, we would have had a red bearish engulfing. And I said I will treat that price action of yesterday as being bearish, and so far so good. Closing near the lows, closing half the gap. There's another gap lower, even another, well, that one's closed already. Yep. So this one, being a little bit more accurate about my pricing there, at about 67.20, 672 and a half, it gets closed. First bounce after that. Then I think I'm looking for the more profound support level. 650 would be the likely downside objective. A few weeks. Next, close part of the gap. Got another gap to consider closing, but that is a little bit below the beginning of some modest support for the last few weeks. And then down here at 650 is much better. Next, gap to close, gap to close. This one's closed. We already closed the third gap a couple of days ago. That's done. QQQ did not have a bearish engulfing, but as I mentioned, I think it's going to get pulled down as it is getting pulled down by everybody else that do have bearish engulfings, sell signals. So looking for just a gap to get closed at 618 and a half, maybe a little bounce off of that, but still expecting 611 and a third. But really, I'm expecting more like 587. Next, 5-minute chart, looking for these gaps to get closed. Once we start closing down below 588, that much lower, a lot lower, then we'll see what happens next. So, MNQ, bearish engulfing, brand new one today. Join the group. Yay! This is just as bearish as the other ones. We should close this. Go. Let's extend this to the right. Oh, stop that. And there we go. Okay, so close this gap. Definitely expected. And really, I'm looking for this support area to be tested, which I think is very likely. Next, bearish engulfing, sell signal. What can I say? This is a 5-minute chart on the NQ. Starting to break previous day's lows. We did get higher than yesterday by a small amount. 1 tick or more counts. Next, Yesterday's bearish engulfing, not dropping down too much today in the YM. It seems to be holding up better than the others. It started to close the gap, but bounced off the top of it. So, of course, I'm going to extend that for a day or two. Let's just go out to a day. And I'm going to raise the bottom of it because that's not quite so exactly. There we go. That's better. All right. So I'm really expecting 45,364 for my downside objective price or area. YM 5-minute chart bouncing back awfully good, and then breaking down substantially. And you've got the Russell. It's been coming down for 3 days now. It stopped at the resistance area, not even in overbought conditions. It just double topped out so far. Speaking of double tops, I haven't mentioned any objectives on the downside if I consider this to be a double top and others. So not yet. And there's the 5-minute Russell. Let's go for bonds. New low close. Like I've been talking about, looking for 115. Well, let's call it 116, a little bit under. Next, notes. Looking for 112 and a few ticks, but that's easy. Let's get down to 111.22-ish. Significant support. Yeah, that looks good. So that's 111.24. Next, still stuck in this little support resistance range in crude. Now the third day. Tried to break out above it. Looked like it almost did, and then boom, back down to the bottom. And now we're stuck there too. So I'm going to pull this to the right a little bit more. Good. And what are we doing? We closed the gap almost completely. I mentioned yesterday that I thought that might be enough. Gaps are almost always closed. 80, I think I went through the percentage. 80, 90% are closed completely, but sometimes they leave a little bit left for crumbs for the birds. And this shot up could have been it. That I think it could have and was probably the gap closure, which was not quite complete, but almost complete. That does happen. Not that often. Of the gap closures or attempted gap closures, 10, 20% of the time. So heating oil started to work its way up, closed steady. Still looking for higher levels. It broke the bear trend line, the top of a downward slanting channel. Well, I meant pennant or a flat bottom right triangle. Nevertheless, close cousins. Looks like it's on its way up. Looking for a test of the tops. I think that one big bearish engulfing was a whopper of a 2-day trade. Remember, we got short up here when I made it a little lower than the previous day's low. Okay. Almost on top gold for a sell signal. Came back up a little bit today. Nothing particularly interesting. It could rally up a little bit more. I don't think very much and make new lows soon. Looking for a move down to 3,600, 3,600. Yeah, a little bit lower. Silver, same kind of commentary. We did catch the top of the market to the exact day so far. And it's right at a little bit of resistance these last several days. Platinum, resistance stopping it pretty good. 5 out of 6 days in a small price range. I know this is a new high close, but that can be misleading sometimes. I think it has a good chance of turning straight back down again. Next, let's get into the copper. Overbought, double top. Looks like potential. I will measure this one. I'm going to take the average of the two highs and go to the lowest low. And it happens to be the day after the first high. And that's the depth of the formation, just like that. I put a line on there, grab the line, and drop it down below the lowest low. That's your downside objective. So I am looking for a test of the lows for the last several months. Next, soybeans. At one point today had a bearish engulfing sell signal, but it closed very strong. This is an outside up day and overbought conditions at or very close to a resistance area. I'm concerned that this is one of my bass-backwards reversals. It looks bullish on the surface, but it closed none of the gap, came down super close, within ticks, and then turned back up. I still think this gap is going to get closed, and then we're going to turn back up for a new high and a new high close. We're trying to break out above the trend line on soybean oil, but it dropped down some more today, clearly below the line, and made a minor new low, testing support again. Oil looks like it might drop off a little bit more once again. Maybe support's not going to hold. I'm not really bearish. I'm just thinking there's one more leg down before it starts to trend higher again. I'm liking soybean oil on the long term. New high up against the resistance area pretty darn accurately, and overbought in soybean meal. Now, I've been screaming bloody murder because it's been in the 90 pluses for the overbought condition. We don't have any lower lows day by day. We have a higher close every day, and it's just simply getting more and more overbought. And I have to say the same thing again. This is incredibly, and this time we're up against the resistance level, adding to the bearish expectation immediately. I would never encourage anybody to be buying under these conditions. If you were long, I'd encourage you to raise your protective self-stop a lot and quickly. We have a bearish engulfing outside down day in corn. It's official sell signal, so I have to be bearish, but I don't know how much it's going to come down. I hope not too much. I hope 410 holds. I don't even think it's going to get quite that low. I'm basically bullish on corn. Why? Because this larger head and shoulder bottom, I didn't like the looks of it. You're late on the shoulders, and it's a double shoulder on the right. You have about the same price levels. That's good, but a single shoulder on the left. I got a buy signal at the bottom. That's great. But I don't like this sell signal. I don't think it's going to go down much or for very long. And I hope it doesn't break 410. Frankly, I hope it doesn't close below today's low and it's negated right away. Just a little intuitive thought here. It's not overbought, just barely got there today in order to turn red. We do have an outside down day though in wheat. It's legitimate. We're pretty darn high at 83 on the RSI, overbought for 3 days, touched and came through a little bit of resistance and turned right back down again. This one looks good to close a gap down at 515, not too much under today's lows. Maybe a little bit lower. There's a variety of modest support levels down in here. You know, that low, that one somewhere in here. But longer term, I'm hoping I can get higher highs on a closing basis within, well, I don't know, a month or less. So I'm not really bearish. I'm short-term negative. Apple, new high close. Getting more overbought, more dangerous. One gap to close, two gaps to close. That one did get closed. There's an old gap back here that hasn't been closed, and I just can't rule that one out, so I'm going to bring it back into view. I'm looking for at least a move down to 241.5. Dropped off today, Tesla. Didn't get overbought. Double top I've been mentioning the possibility of. Now it's looking a little bit more likely. Let's make that measurement again. Since the highs aren't exact, I'm going to take the approximate average of the two highs to the lowest low between the two highs and measure down from that point to the lowest low. Then you take that stick, if you will, and drop it from the lowest low down, and you got a downside objective of about 350, 360. Next. We gapped out. We gapped up yesterday. Told you about gaps. Gaps closed the next day today. Boom. Nvidia, that could have been a high. That looks like an exhaustion gap. It's in the right place for it. After getting very overbought, it reached 86. Not quite my 90 to scream bloody murder. Excuse me, but 86 is very high. Now you can see if you look across the scale, you get up to 86, it turned down for a few days. You get up almost 86, it did the same thing. Get almost up to and a little bit above 86, and it did the same thing. So it's going to do the same thing. I'd expect it to drop down at least to 195. Frankly, there's a gap to close at 187, and I wouldn't be surprised to see something in the neighborhood of 171 next. Same kind of story for AMD. Overbought, very much so, especially if you go back to the 93 level a couple of weeks ago. But it corrected the overbought condition and then dropped in a new, shoved itself up in a new high ground again. I really am looking for all the way down to 170. But this gap to close at a very bare minimum of 235. And you guys have a great day and profitable trading to you.